Open up, step right in into the digital doorway. Let the podcast begin. Here's where the journey starts. Stories unfold, wisdom to win. Voices share, connect the hearts. Tune in tight, let the vibes flow. In this space we'll all grow. Open up.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Doorway Daily Huddle podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing the meaning of work. What does work mean? What does work mean to you, your life? But on a fundamental level, how often do you stop to think about what is the definition of work? I myself have used two definitions of work to establish the way I look at the work I have to do professionally, the work I have to do personally, and all work in general. These, for me, are fundamental ideas of what work is. So the first definition of work that I use comes from physics. Work equals force times displacement. And in that equation, our efforts are the force. And work is positive when the force helps the motion and negative when it resists it. That variable displacement is essentially in physics measured in meters. It's how far the force can push something. So when we superimpose that on our professional lives, I see it as we bring a force to work to help move things forward or resist them. And a lot of people act as resistors, and that really doesn't help the work. That diminishes the amount of work that gets done. So I always look to be a positive force, helping to move things forward when I think of work. And this is a fundamental definition of work in physics, and it applies to the physical world, but I've superimposed it onto the more theoretical world, and it's helped me understand what work means to me. It means being a force that makes the work positive, that moves things forward, not a negative force that resists the movement and keeps it back. And then the other definition I have, which is very much more poetic and goes far more into the emotional and psychological realm, comes from the book The Prophet by the esteemed poet Khalil Gibran. If you haven't read his work or engaged with it, I highly recommend it. I see it as life-changing. And one of the ways it changed my life is by giving me a new definition of work. So I won't read the whole poem that he has, but I will read from the line that has changed my definition of work ever since I read it for the first time decades ago. Work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and sit at the gates of the temple and take alms of those who work with joy. For if you bake bread with indifference, you bake a bitter bread that feeds but half man's hunger. And if you grudge the crushing of the grapes, your grudge distills a poison in the wine. And if you sing, though as angels, and love not the singing, you muffle man's ears to the voices of the day and the voices of the night. Work is love made visible. That was the second definition that came to me after the one provided by my physics teachers in high school. That helped me understand how to approach work and what is the meaning of work. And it's to be something that invigorates you. It is to be something that is done with joy, not with distaste. And if it is done with distaste, that is a red flag. If it is a grind, if it grinds you down and doesn't build you up, then the work you are doing is not your love made visible. And that essentially means to me that when you feel good about what you do, then you're going to do good work. And as Viktor Frankl mentions in The Will to Meaning, if you focus on your talents with conscience, then you will find the purpose. And that purpose is essentially what imbues your life with meaning, your work with meaning. But you can't get that if you aren't doing it with love and joy. So I'm going to open up the floor. What do you guys think of that little poem and my definitions of work?
From my side, I was thinking about the flywheel in your first definition when you mentioned the physics part of it and how it all needs force, and there's also sometimes a positive force and a negative force. And when I think of the flywheel and how it starts moving, especially like when you put everything together about how when you enjoy what you do, you produce good work. It kind of reminds me a lot of the flywheel and how initially it'll basically require a force from us, like to get the flywheel moving. And sometimes there can be a positive force that keeps the momentum going. And it might be a bit difficult in the beginning, but as time goes, it does become a bit easier as you enjoy and produce better outcomes. But there are sometimes those who bring a negative force to the flywheel or negative force to work, and that can hinder the momentum, or that can hinder basically the whole work being done. And it's just I just like that definition of the force that we apply. And and I just that's basically my understanding of it. And it also just reminds me of an interview I watched of Tom Cruise, when they basically the interviewer asked him how did he become so successful, and he didn't really talk a lot about studying this and studying that. He just spoke about the force he applied into every job that he found himself in. So he didn't really go into detail of, or me, I don't remember which jobs he worked, but he spoke about in every job that he worked in, he did his best to basically produce the best outcomes. And it reminds me a lot of that that reminded me, or that came to mind as you spoke about the first definition of work that you mentioned, that it's the force that you apply. And how it comes out or how it's produced depends a lot on the force that we bring into it.
That's a great point, OP. Bringing the flywheel into it. Flywheels are, even physical flywheels are all about that momentum and inertia.
Yeah.
And yes, it requires pushing, and it requires a lot of pushing over a lot of time to build that momentum. And yes, if you're pushing the one way and somebody pushes the other way, it kills that momentum. That's a very good point. When you talk about Tom Cruise, I can only interview I ever remember of him was when he was jumping on the couch with Oprah, going all crazy. But yes, it's you can't argue that he is not one of the most successful actors on the planet, and that he has, his whole shtick with the Mission Impossible series and doing his stunts and whatever. I think it is fair to say that he does put a lot of force into it, and the force that he's put into it now over decades consistently has led to this momentum where the Mission Impossible franchise has how many movies? I've only watched the first one, and then I think I watched the second one when it came out. And for me, there is only one Mission Impossible movie. But come now, that's almost 10 films at this point, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that definitely speaks to the force he put into it to build that momentum. That's a great point. Who's next?
I love your definition of work as love made visible, because it's so easy to see any kind of craft. Straight away, you can see without knowing any information or being intelligent, you can tell when work has been put into something. It's in our natural consciousness to tell when someone's just devoted themselves to doing something. If you can be the most uneducated person and the most educated person, and both people will be able to tell when someone's really put their heart into something, which I think is really cool. Love is actually the formula to make work beautiful. So I really liked that poem that you read. And then the first definition that you said, which was you should be bringing something to the table that's a positive force that brings something to the table that's positive, you know. And I was just thinking about that, and I think the main thing for me is it should drive humanity forward. It should be a force that drives humanity forward, because then ultimately everyone wants to be involved, because there's a strong purpose, and because we're communal, we want to be better. We want our children to be better. We want to push forward. But if you're just working and you're like, there's not really a purpose to this, it's not really driving anyone forward, then you've already lost the battle. But if you have a mission statement where it's like, well, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, I think it just adds purpose to your work. Yeah, that's what I think.
For sure. Those are good points. I just want to say one thing. That's not my definition here. That's Khalil Gibran's. Many of these ideas I share are not mine. I've just learned them from other people who, were good enough to share them and write them down. But yeah, that's very good points, Ricky. I think the first one that you made me think of is when you can see something that somebody's poured their love into. I feel like what you're describing is a masterpiece. Whether it's music or a presentation or anything that was created with human endeavor, where that love has been imbued, I think we can call a masterpiece. And then I think, working backwards from that definition, we can say anybody who has the capability of working with love, or their work is their love made visible, we could call a master. Even if they may not have the most technical skill or whatever, it's the fact that they can tap into that and pour it into their work. And yeah, the second one, the positive force, as you say, you said driving humanity forward. And we can think of humanity as just the mass of people, but even in a situation, to increase the amount of humanity, to be positive towards other people, to improve the people's lives you're working with, not to be a hassle in their life. You know, when Ricky comes to the table, we're not feeling like, oh, damn, here comes Ricky. Now it's going to be a slog. And that was the word that came to mind when you were saying when people just, work without that love, is having a slog. Like it's just a slog. It's negative. It's blah. But coming to the table with that positivity, that positive force to move things forward, I think increases the humanity of everybody in the room. Because they can be more themselves. They get to express themselves better. They get to express their love through their work better. And that is the sort of thing that will drive humanity forward. Prince, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, I think I like the line where you say, work is love made visible. Because I like to think that what we do, let's say here at DD, it's to some extent art. Because every month we look at this content plans and it's empty. And then from there we work on it. We put our ideas there in terms of posts. Then there comes the creatives, and then we create this whole complete story that we're going to tell throughout the month. And we often joke in DD that it's very difficult. Like if you just give someone a content plan and ask them to give their input, like people are going to say, they won't put any input. But then once we do our thing and the art, and we start painting the content plans with our ideas, and it's a complete story now, then people, since now they can see, okay, this is the copy and this is the creatives and this tells the story. That's only then they can be able to put their input.
For sure. It is unarguably a creative process. We create something that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
And because we do it in an ethical way with the bigger picture in mind, we're not trying to swindle people out of their money to buy snake oil. We are genuinely trying to get people to build relationships that can improve their lives, that will make their life better. Because if you work with this business and that business, you're going to be able to do better business. But yeah, that's a great point, is we do work in a creative industry, and we are creating that value, and it is a creative process. And yes, very often many people are unable to even imagine something when they're looking at that blank plan, that clean slate, that tabula rasa. And after we etch something into it, which we do, with a strategy, tactically, we're not just throwing paint at the wall and seeing what sticks. We're using our training, we're using our knowledge to create a strategy that is creative, but in a purposeful way. And then, yes, that actually equips others then to be able to contribute. But I think we've also seen many times over different clients how their contributions can then just be negative judgments about why it's wrong, without actually, adding that positive force of like, there's some clients will just say, this picture is bad, whereas another client will say, I don't think we should use this picture. Perhaps we can use a picture, and then provides a description. One of those is a positive force and one of those is a negative force. One of those gives a bit more momentum to increase, as OP was talking about, the flywheel's inertia. And the other one pushes the other way to slow it down. And I think of a quote accredited to Carl Jung, although he apparently never said it, was that people judge because it is easy. Intelligence is hard. And yeah, it's very easy to look at something and judge it and say why it's bad. It's very easy to poke holes in things. It's a lot more difficult to patch holes. It's a lot more difficult to help build something than it is to tear something down. And I do believe that, yeah, we always aim to build. We always aim to be a positive force. And being that positive force, I think, is what lays the foundation for being able to actually pour your love into something, even if it is what I think to many people seems completely nonsensical, like a content plan. I've got a lot of entrepreneur friends who, they're doing their work. They're organizing a building site. They're, doing architectural drawings. They're doing MEP designs. To them, that is the meaningful work. And how could, sharing stuff online be meaningful? But then we show them, as you've pointed out, Prince, a narrative, a story, and how each piece of content weaves the story together and reaches people, again, not in a way that is meant to manipulate them to make a decision that's not in their best interests, but to help them understand that this decision is in their best interests. Because if we're trying to help the friend who does MEP to help an architect, building that relationship is not, it's not negative, it's a positive. It's a symbiosis whereby each of them, they get improvements from it, not resistance from it, not a negative from it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I was thinking as Prince was talking about this whole the idea of crafting a narrative. It makes me think of work allowing us also to be part of a narrative, and because I think I forgot which person specifically said this, but humans are creative beings, and we are at our best when we are creating, and it might be different, like you're saying, Dylan. For some people it's creating those architectural designs. For us, it's crafting these stories on content plans. But whatever it might be, on whatever form it is, work allows us to be a part of this greater narrative or this greater story that we get to be a part of as creative beings. It's not just about just sitting, and it allows us to do more with what's inside of us. And yeah, I like that idea of contrasting two industries, but at the essence of it, of them both, it's it's work, it's creativity in different forms. And yeah, I think that's what work allows us to do as well. It's just to express some form of creativity and intelligence.
For sure. I think Also, when I think of creating and a creative process, when you're creating something of value, now that is the basis of what economic activity should be.
Yeah.
You take the 5 factors of production and you create something of value. And the fact is, there are many industries that don't create anything of value. They exploit. They take more than they give. And Joe Polish likes to say, life gives to the givers. If you always be taking, life will take from you as well. But for me, it's a fundamental foundation of being an entrepreneur, of being in business, of working, is that we are creating something of value. And then, we take that value to market and we claim that value in the market because you know what? We've actually created something of value. I think a lot of people struggle with negotiation because what they've done actually isn't creating value. They've dressed up a horse and they're trying to sell it as a cow. And it's like, nah, you didn't actually do some farming here. You didn't create more cows with, the factors of production needed. So I think, creativity and creating is a fundamental part of being a good economic actor, of contributing to the economy positively. All right, then. I think that was an insightful conversation. I think although we may not have cracked the meaning of life or the entire meaning of work, I think we can all agree that being a positive force, making your love visible, creating is fundamental to finding true meaning in the work you do. Don't be out here to resist others, build the momentum to, make things better for humanity, to increase humanity in each other, and create value. Because that is the fundamental idea of the market, that you come to the market with something of value. And if you can't find the value in what you're doing, maybe reassess what you're doing. Look for something else, because as the poem says, rather go begging than to do work that you do with distaste, because that's then how you poison the work. And we don't need any more of that in the world. We need more positive creation of true value.
Spin, join